Right, we stay with that story then. Now I'm joined by anti-racism activist and author Zulaikha Patel and brand expert Solly Moeng. Discuss this a little bit further. Hi Solly, hi Zulaikha, good evening and thank you very much for your time. So the regulatory body says we've offered training workshop on the code and only one agency takes the offer up. I mean, that in itself is something that we need to discuss a little bit broadly. How serious is the sector taking this question of racism, Solly?
Well, I think, first of all, we need to be careful not to generalize. I mean, there are bad apples and there are good apples in all the sector. We have one of the most dynamic sectors in South Africa. And if you look at the acts that happened, that shouldn't have happened, it's important that steps are taken, not only punitive measures against the agencies, but I mean, we also need to have a sense, an agreement, a national agreement on what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And I agree with the idea that we need to move on into inclusivity training and not diversity training. I agree that we need it needs to be clear what is acceptable, what's not acceptable. But agencies can't do the right thing when they are not sufficiently representative. And I'm not talking quotas here, I'm talking in terms of thinking, quotas, in terms of thinking, in terms of the kind of thinking that we have in teams. And agencies are not alone to take the responsibility for the clients. Everything that gets into the public is approved by the client, all right? So the companies who are customers of these agencies cannot claim ignorance. They are the ones who say, yes, we love it. No, we don't love it in the end, all right? So both these parties have to understand the kind of society that we live in, where we come from, and basically basic human sense. I mean, it's time that these things don't happen anymore. It's crazy, some of these things. It really is.
Well, sorry, talking there about the sanctions that are meted out to advertising companies. One of the suggestions coming out from the hearings of the South African Human Rights Commission from the EFF's Dr. Mbuyiseni Ndlozi is that advertising industries must be fined 50 billion rands for perpetuating racism. How effective would these sanctions be is the question, and what more could be done? For example, if there is a code in place and people are not taking up the training that is required for the code, what else needs to be done? But first, though, Zulaikha Patel, is the problem of racism rife in advertising? But also, question is it top of mind for leaders within this space to address this issue?
A very good evening to you. Thank you for having me. And to answer your question, I wouldn't say racism is rife within advertising, but racism is rife within our country. And our advertising is a reflection of racism being rife within our country, right? And so I wouldn't say it's just rife within advertising. It's rife within our country, and our advertising is a reflection of our country, right? And I do believe that leaders within that space, it is their responsibility to also address this issue, because it is a social issue that intersects with every single facet of our everyday lives, and it isn't one that they can just ignore.
Yeah. Why is it becoming a challenge for these organizations or even clients, as Solly puts it, to adapt, for example, to the new face of consumers of their products, right? If you look at, for example, the Tresemme example, you would think a company like that would have known by now and done its research to know that they are selling to a broad base of consumers, and therefore their advertising would need to be a little bit more nuanced.
Mm-hmm. You know, I believe that it's the fact that we haven't normalized that change and inclusivity within our society as a whole, which is why I spoke about the fact that our advertising is a reflection of our society in general. And so if we haven't normalized that, that's internalized within every single person, right? And then that then is reflected in their actions, right? And that's how we see it constantly repeating itself in advertising, right? Where companies perpetuate racism within their ads. I mean, 2 years just before 2020, when that Tresemme ad was released, there was in 2018 another ad, and then previously to them. So it's been a constant pattern, which is also a reflection of how we as a society also haven't reached that point of normalizing inclusivity, and even just in general, understanding that we need to live in an inclusive society where you now understand that that the consumers are not just only one group of people, but you're selling to every single citizen in the country.
Normalizing inclusivity, Solly. I don't know if I mean, I don't generally read the textbooks and the stuff that is being currently used in marketing, but maybe for somebody who is in that space and who checks these things out, is there something that needs to be done, particularly in what students are being taught around demographics and around how you segment markets and how you sell particular products? I mean, the whole issue of selling washing powder to township women, using women who wash with their hands as opposed to selling it using a washing machine. All those things that need to be changed somewhat in the literature that is being used around marketing and advertising.
Yeah, look, if it comes as some form of consolation, it's not unique to South Africa. I teach reputation management at the EU Business School, and we were just looking at cases in India where companies used to promote a certain idea of beauty. And you know, in India, skin lightening products are very, very popular. So if you're dark skinned, if you're an Indian with the dark skin, you're not beautiful enough. If you don't have long hair, you're not beautiful. If you're short, you're not beautiful enough. And these things are beginning to change now. People are beginning to say, wait a minute, who are you to define what is beauty? So it's happening in South Africa. I think we all grow up in environments where certain things becomes normalized, in silos, cultural silos. That's why there's worth in having teams that are diverse. You know, I don't think that, you know, where it's clear that people deliberately went out to offend, of course we have to be really, really harsh. But a lot of times people are not realizing that the things that they grew up having normalized are actually not good. Especially when you leave your cultural silo, you enter the diverse world. You say things that were not frowned upon in your community. Suddenly people frown at the things that you say. You're like, what's wrong? I'm not racist. I'm a nice guy. So we need that kind of training. People need to realize that as societies evolve, expectations change. People don't view themselves the way they used to, or you think they view themselves as you grow up. There's a lot of training, sensitivity training, really, inclusivity training as we go on. But I don't think that we should destroy the whole industry because of these things. We should be firm where wrong things are done. Yeah. But we should insist on inclusive teams. And inclusive team doesn't mean that a picture-perfect team of white, black, white, Indian, color, No, it should be, to what extent do these people in the team have the space to express themselves, to say, but we can't say this, we can do this thing is not going to be acceptable over there. A lot of times it's the one person at the top who decides this is it, and other people are just looking good and they earn their salaries, but they do not have the space and the fearlessness in the team, in team discussions to say, but I'm not comfortable with this thing going out there. So we need to create this space. Companies have the responsibility to create a space for people to really contribute from their perspective, from where they come from. And we're not there yet. But again, we must talk about clients. It's important that we don't just talk about agencies. Agencies do not impose things on clients. If I go back to the Bell Pottinger story, Bell Pottinger is gone. All the focus and anchor was on Bell Pottinger. But Bell Pottinger was briefed. It was paid by somebody in South Africa. Okay? And those people were not paying sufficient attention to. They paid that guy agency for 2 years. Agencies are paid by people who are happy with what the agencies give them, who approve what the agencies give. So we have to have a 360-degree discussion about what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, what kind of training needs to happen, and what has to happen going forward.
Let's take a break. We'll continue. What has to happen going forward? What does that accountability look like? Zulaikha Patel saying that it's time advertising agencies were held more accountable because she believes that this particular advert is not a first of its kind. There have been many others, and there's a pattern of repeat behavior. We'll talk more on that when we come back. Stay tonight, Town in Focus, Newzroom Afrika, Channel 405, anti-racism activist Zulaikha Patel and brand expert Solly Moeng joining us tonight. And the focus is on accountability within the advertising sector for discriminatory advertisements that go out. Zulaikha, you suggest that the companies should be held more accountable, but one of your suggestions or recommendations is a national document to be drawn up to say what advertising should portray and what messaging is discriminatory. The board is speaking of something called the code. Does the code not go far enough? Is that not addressing those issues that you would like to see addressed in this document that you recommend?
See, the recommendation which I made yesterday in my proposition about the drawing up of a document that won't necessarily say this is the kind of messaging that should be in advertising, but would be a guideline as well as a document on stating what kind of accountability would be put in place for should there be a case of a discriminatory advertisement being released, right? And so I don't think it necessarily goes far enough, because we've been seeing this constant repetition of these advertisements being released, and we haven't seen sufficient accountability. All that we've been seeing is that for a day we talk about it, and then all that happens is a slap on the hand, and then we move on after that. And I think that that's a reflection on how our society looks in terms of racism in general. We've never really had intensive accountability towards racism and towards incidents of racism within our country, right, that have taken place post-1994, right? And so I believe that it doesn't go far enough, and that document that I recommended, it would be a guideline as well as a document that would stipulate and outline accountability and outline what is discriminatory, and this is what you cannot portray in your adverts.
Yeah. What does accountability look like in today's society? In your view, that would make this process effective?
Accountability for me is something that goes hand in hand with justice. Justice can't exist without accountability, right? And what accountability looks like in today's society, right, is whereby there is repercussions, direct repercussions for those that perpetuate racism, and also further there are reparations for those that have become victims towards the discrimination experience under those who have perpetuated it, right? And so just to give an example of what I'm saying so that you understand much clearer, right, is what I'm saying. For example, right, let's take brand X releases a racist advertisement. That advertisement should be removed. That brand should be fined. There should be repercussions within the board of that brand, whereby individuals who approved that to be released are held accountable. The approval that the person that gave the go-ahead for that to be released, there are repercussions for that person, there are job losses, there are fines, and then further, there is an inclusivity training where you critically look into that brand, look into their structures, how many black people do they have on their board, for example, and what does representation on their board look like, and also looking into their kind of messaging. Are they only sending messages out to one group in society? And if so, that must then change, right? Because there's not only one group in society that exists within the Republic of South Africa, right? And so then there must then be inclusivity trainings, as I mentioned, not diversity trainings, because I believe we're well aware what diversity is. We see it and we understand it and we know it. There should be inclusivity trainings where you look directly and critically into the structure and the framework of that brand, right? And should it not meet the necessary standard, there should then be repercussions as well where they are forced to make changes.
Yeah. And it's very interesting views there, Solly. I mean, it goes far beyond. I mean, my experience is that, for example, for products, advertising agencies would have what they call a Bible. I mean, so what essentially Zulaikha is suggesting that Bible must be looked into a little bit if you're looking at the architecture of the product or the brand itself and what it stands for, what its values are, and that must be interrogated a little bit further, because advertising agencies really follow that Bible, so to speak, to the T as far as how that brand is supposed to communicate.
Yeah, look, I wouldn't come down with a strong sledgehammer. I mean, like, we are, as a society, we are healing from the past, all of us. To be honest, in my view, racism comes from all communities. It's not just white people. I've seen black people who are racist. We don't want to talk about these things. I think we need to learn as South Africans from the pain of our past. We need to learn inclusivity. I take exception in cases where people deliberately went out to hide. A lot of times it's not. A lot of times people act on their own inbred prejudice. There's inbred prejudice. You find that they're actually nice people. They're not racist, whatever that means by somebody's racist. You got to beat them up and take money from them, close their business. I don't believe in that approach to life. I think we need to continue educating one another, getting people to understand the importance of diversity and how to be inclusive in a real sense. And of course, where criminal activity or criminal action is made, there's got to be there's got to be punitive measures that are not meant to destroy, but to punish. There's a difference between destroying something and punishing something. There are a lot of agencies in South Africa, actually probably most agencies have got black partners. One has to ask, what is the role of those black partners? So if you're going to destroy agencies because we assume that black advertising agencies, including the ones that produce these ads that we discussed, are owned wholly by white people, you'd be surprised if you look behind, all right? So it's important that we have conversations about what is acceptable in the norms of society, of the South African society, and what is not acceptable, and how do we deal with what's not acceptable? How do we teach people to live in a society as diverse as ours, rather than coming down with sledgehammers to destroy stuff because we're not happy with it? I don't believe that.
Yeah. So the commission is going through this process because, of course, these issues have been raised over and over again. I'm not sure how far they will go in as far as bringing in client, but I know they're speaking to activists like Zulaikha, they're speaking to political parties like the EFF, they are now speaking to the board, the regulatory board, and they'll be bringing in some researchers and analysts. Say, I'm not sure what's going to happen, but say they don't bring in client, would this be a missed opportunity, and would this create an unfinished product, so to speak, when this report comes out?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I've worked in the industry on both sides of the industry, okay, of the divide, the client side and the buyer side, or the agency side, okay. I can tell you that there is not a single ad that goes into the public without the client approving it. So if you're going to just punish agencies because we assume they're owned by white racist people, then we're being emotional. We can't sort out this historic problem in South Africa with emotion. I'm sorry, we can't. We need to be rational about this thing. We need to be balanced. We need to be empathetic. But we need to bring in other parties. We need to give the industry in South Africa the opportunity. And of course, somebody could say, yeah, but they've been going in for a long time. But, there are good agents. If you watch South African TV every day, there are lots of ads on TV, on radio all the time. It's a small number of ads that come out from time to time that create this kind of emotion. So we're not going to use those few examples to hit everybody with a sledgehammer. But we need to look at all the key players. We need to understand the process of approving an ad. From the time the concept is created, to the production, the choosing of the cast of the actors, actresses in the ad, the client plays a big part. I can tell you that for sure. The agency will say, okay, for this ad, we've got these two actors or actresses. Do you like them? Yeah, no. In the end, the client says, yeah, I don't like that guy. Oh, I like that guy. Okay, let's go with the tall guy. The client plays a role. Okay. In the end, when the final ad gets placed in front of the eye of the client before it goes to the ad, flighted, the client approves it. Give me an example of an ad that hits the airways without the client being happy. The client won't pay. There's no such thing. So let's be balanced. Let's not be too emotional in dealing with this thing. It's a big problem, of course, given the country where we come from, the diversity and all that. It means that there are many things that we have taken for granted. We have to have those conversations again in a balanced way, not with emotion.
One would argue that if you are talking about client, then you must hit them where it matters most. And if it doesn't hit them in the pocket, it won't move them at all. So unless somebody actually does come up and say, don't buy that product, or that product is not going to go on the shelves, the clients are not going to pay attention.
Yeah, sure. No, I agree. Look, I'm not saying nobody must be hit. We must hit them where it has most. Otherwise, they won't change. But I'm saying we mustn't hit to destroy. We mustn't use nuclear bombs here. Okay? Yeah. People must feel that it's wrong to do certain things. There's got to be ways that you hit them in a way that they understand. Fines, I like the ideas of fines. Contribute to a fund, say, for inclusivity training or something like that. But don't destroy the agency. The thing is, the majority of South African agencies are awesome. They create awesome work all the time. From time to time, an ad comes up that offends us, that makes us angry, that throws the AEFF into the streets and all that. But it's one ad or 2, 3 ads. And these ads that we're discussing happened 3, 4 years ago, isn't it? What has happened in the interim period? So it's important that we are balanced when we approach this. It really is. But it's also important to your question that the clients come in. The clients of these ads must tell us how in the world did you approve this thing. You find that some of the marketing managers are black people. Okay? I've also been an actor in ads. Wow. So a lot of times you see the client is represented by a black woman or a black man who is the head of marketing. He's the one who says, no, I like it, I don't like it. So we must have those conversations. Right. We think that all these things that offend us must come from one people. It's wrong. It's not true.
Zulaikha, if this process with the Commission is to be effective, what would you like to see come out of it?
Okay. If this process is effective, which I truly hope that it will be, what I'd like to see come out of it is accountability. Accountability, as I've mentioned, the client that approved for that ad to be released, an ad that directly reinforced, an ad that it wasn't, you can't just say it was an unkind ad towards black women. It was a racist ad that reinforced that reinforced the racism and the anti-blackness which was constructed within colonialism and under the apartheid regime, that took something tangible such as hair and made hair something to use as a tool to make black people feel and be seen by everyone as less inferior. It was used as a tool of exclusion, used as a tool to enforce their oppression. That was a direct reinforcement of that. It was a reinforcement of that anti-blackness, and therefore that ad was not an ad that was just something light. That ad was hurtful. That ad was offensive, and it dented for children, young black children that witnessed that ad. It probably could have dented their confidence as well when they look at that ad and see that their hair that looks like theirs is being called dull, dry, and frizzy. There must be accountability taken against the person that gave the go-ahead for that to be released. And there must be fines. And furthermore, there must be a direct interrogation into the board that discussed the concept of this. That said, this is a concept that we're coming up with, and this is what we want to see in our ad. And then they gave that concept to then the agency. There must be an interrogation into that board, and then further, that entire board must undergo an inclusivity training.
Right. Let's leave it there for tonight. I appreciate you all. Thanks so much for coming on tonight. Zulaikha Patel as well as Solly Moeng there, helping us in that conversation.